Hello, in this presentation we will compare QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop. Hello, in this presentation we will create, analyze, and export to Excel a summary balance sheet within QuickBooks Online. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are, the QuickBooks Online dashboard. We will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. We're going to be looking this time at a balance sheet, but a more summarized balance sheet, a balance sheet that gives us less detail and more of the big picture type of format, that being the summary balance sheet. In order to do that, we're going to go to the reports down here, and that's on the left side. And we have the standard balance sheet here. What we're looking for is the summary balance sheet. Before we go there, however, let's just take one quick look at the balance sheet, the standard balance sheet, which we've seen in the past, and then we'll compare and contrast that to the summary balance sheet. So if we go here, I'm going to type in balance sheet, although it's already down there because it should be in the frequently visited reports, but if it's not, we'll go to the balance sheet. And we're going to look at that 2-month time frame. Again, we're going to say we want the month of 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. That's January 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021, and we will run that report. So here's our report. Here's the standard balance sheet, and it gives us a lot of detail in that it gives us assets, and then it gives us within the assets, it gives us a breakout of the current assets, and then a further breakdown between the checking account, the accounts receivable, other current assets. Then we've got the breakdown of the fixed assets, and then the liabilities and equity, and the further breaking down of the current liabilities, the credit card liabilities, the other current liabilities, and then the long-term liabilities. And then, of course, we have the equity section. So we have a fair amount of detail in the standard balance sheet. We've got these different groupings. The balance sheet, in essence, we know, if we scroll back up here, can be broken down to just the accounting equation. If I select this little triangle next to assets, and this little triangle next to liabilities and equity, that's basically as simplified as the balance sheet gets. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. We're going to look at a standard type of format that's going to be a little bit more detailed than what we see here in our standard balance sheet. Not see here, but if we were to expand these, what we would see in our standard balance sheet, but obviously it has more detail than this, that being the summary balance sheet. So to do that, we're going to go back to the reports on the left side. We're going to type in here balance sheet one more time. We're going to say balance sheet and look at the options we have. One of those options then will be the summary balance sheet. So we want the summary balance sheet, and we're going to select that item, and we will change those date ranges one more time. This is going to be 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. That's January 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2021, and we will run that report. Now note once again that if you don't have any data, if you're working through the problem, clearly you've just opened the file. We don't have any data there, but this is just going to give us an example of what we have, what we're going to do later, and how we could format data with a sheet that has populated information in it. And so if you're working with us, we don't have anything there. This will be the end result. Then we'll go back through this and see some of these reports as we go. So if we scroll back down, now we see the same data, but within the assets, we have the current assets broken out. We didn't break out the banks as a separate category. The accounts receivable as a separate category. And then all the other current assets you'll see are grouped together here in this 15. If we select that 15, we see the detail here, and we're going to get, the detail for all the other current assets. We're going to go back to, and notice it's broken down. So we've got inventory assets here, and then we've got the total for inventory, then we got prepaid insurance, short-term investments. So really what it's giving us is a transaction report, or kind of like a general ledger report for all the accounts that it grouped together in this summarized balance sheet report. We're going to scroll back up top. We're going to go back to this report. So we have that grouping here. Now notice this is closer, this bank accounts is closer to what we might see on a standard balance sheet, that if we were preparing it for the bank or something, we would probably call it cash, and we would include all bank accounts. The savings account, the checking account, cash, and cash equivalents would all be included in cash. Accounts receivable typically is one account, but we could have multiple types of accounts, and within QuickBooks it separates those two into a subcategory so that it could easily group them into a subsidiary ledger by customer. And then the other current assets are going to be there could be a lot of those. And as we've seen, there's going to be a lot of grouping of those into just one account. That summary may be very useful. It really depends who we're talking to. If we're talking to somebody like an investor or possibly someone in a management position that just wants the overall picture, then this is probably what we want to show them. They don't need to see all the detail for the other current assets. They probably want to see, well, how much cash do we got? And what's our total assets here? How much do we owe down here? And what's our equity? What's the value of the company in total? They don't need to see the total breakout. Now, it's probably a good idea if you're printing these reports or preparing to demonstrate them to somebody to first print this report out and prepare yourself to give this report first, and then prepare for questions about more detail and have the more detailed report ready upon more detail. So what you don't want to do is get the most detailed report and try to dig into the weeds and just totally lose people up front. What you probably want to do is take the summary report, have the really big picture report, really simplified report, get as much information to whoever you would like to without having their eyes glaze over with that report, something like this. And then as they ask more questions, or as you are engaging them and seeing that they're engaged in what we're getting into, then we can get into more of the weeds and start to get the more detailed reports, and they're more likely to be receptive to that. So that's going to be this. And so then we've got the fixed assets be grouped together as well. That includes accumulated depreciation and all fixed assets like cars and equipment and whatnot. Then we have the current liabilities. We've got the accounts payable grouped together. Typically there's only one. Credit cards, all credit cards would be here. We only have one here, but all credit cards here. And then once again, the other current liabilities. This is probably going to include a lot of different items. So if we were to select that, then we would get the detail for the property tax or sales tax payable here. And we've got the interest payable, the loan payable. So this is giving us a GL in essence for all of these types of accounts. We're going to scroll back up top, and we're going to go back to the report, the balance sheet. And then in the equity section, we see what's really typical of most balance sheets. If it's a sole proprietor, we only see one account. Oftentimes, if it was a sole proprietor, we would call it a capital account. They call it just equity. It's all of equity. So when we saw the standard balance sheet, the QuickBooks breaks it out into a lot of detail, meaning it's going to break out what they call the retained earnings. For a sole proprietor, would probably be called capital in like a theory book. And they broke out investments from the owner and what draws, which they called something different than draws, but they broke out the draws, what the owner took out. And they also put even net income into the balance sheet to try to show us that link between the balance sheet and the income statement. So here we just have the equity, which is probably a lot easier to show people. When we want to say, hey, what's the value of the company? We can just say, it's that one number, that's the equity, that's our assets minus liability. If we were to sell the company, in other words, and were to get cash for all the assets in the exact amount the assets are reported for and pay off all the liabilities, this is what we would walk away from with the company in theory. So we're going to remove this item, and then we're going to export this to Excel. So we're going to scroll back up top. We're going to go to the customized reports up top. We're going to scroll back down to the header and footer. And we're going to scroll down and we will remove the date prepared, the time prepared, and the report basis. Then we're going to go ahead and run that report once again. Now we're going to export this report to Excel. So all we have to do that is to select this drop down, this export section, and export to Excel. It should then open up Excel automatically, assuming we have Excel set up on the computer. And we will open up the Excel document in that format. As it opens up, it will typically often have this enable editing feature, and we want to enable editing. We will hopefully be able to trust the information we are getting, and we're going to put that there. Now remember that it does have the title up top, looks really nice. It is merging those cells, so if we want to format that, it's in the Home tab, Alignment and Merge Cells. So you might want to, and just so you can see, if I click the merge cells, see it's in cell A and B. If I select merge cells, then it just goes to cell A, and that really makes it difficult for some of the formatting. If you want to merge across A and B without merging the cells, by the way, you can do that. I can highlight both A and B and right click and go to Format Cells. And instead of merging it, we go to Alignment, and we want to go to the, so I'm in Alignment tab, and the horizontal, we want to center across the selection. So we're centering across what we selected. And if we do that, we get that nice centering without making this merged cell, which can throw off problems when we start to highlight columns and do things like that. So it's an option if you want to manipulate some of these reports. We're going to go ahead and save this. We're going to go to the File tab to the left. We're going to Save As, and we're going to go to Browse to where we want to save this as. I'm going to save it into the Excel Docs 1 here. I'm going to change the name to, we're just going to call it Summary Balance Sheet. We'll just call it a Summary Balance Sheet. The date would probably be useful. We might want to, add the dates, and you might want to put the dates up top, because then it'll sort by dates. So you could put 12/31/21, and you might want to think about how we're going to sort that. If you were going to sort, have multiple years in one folder, you might want to put the year first in some format. If you're going to have only 1 month, or you could sort each folder by month, then you just need the dates in there. But just think about your sorting options there. We're going to save that, and that will be the summary balance sheet. Hello, in this presentation we will create a summary balance sheet within QuickBooks Pro 2018. If you've been following along with us, we will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. If not, that's okay. We're going to talk about how to create a summary balance sheet. If you have the backup, you can restore the backup by going to File and Restore. We have the Open Windows tab open, which can be found at the View and Open Windows list. We also have the Home page open, found at Company and Home page. We're going to be looking at the summary balance sheet, and in order to look at the summary balance sheet, first want to compare and contrast it to the balance sheet most typically used, the one that we have been working with, the standard balance sheet. So let's open the standard balance sheet first and then work some comparisons by going to the drop down up top for the reports, selecting company and financial, and going down to the balance sheet. This is the standard balance sheet. We're going to create it as of the date of 12/31/21. So here's the date, December 31st, 2021. We have the standard balance sheet. Now, you'll note that the standard balance sheet has a lot of detail in it. Now, we can compress some of this stuff and look at it in terms of less detail, saying here's all the current assets, or compress some of these items to see less detail. But many times we might want to just not bog someone down. If I don't want to bog someone down with too much information, especially if I have set up an account that has a lot of subcategories or in order to process my information. There's sometimes I want to get to the accounts and have a lot of accounts so that I know exactly what is going on, so that I can see what's happening, especially if it's something like investments down here. I might have a lot of subcategory accounts because I'm tracking each individual investment and I would like to see that detail. But if I'm giving this information to someone else, it's quite possible that I do not want to overwhelm someone else with all that detail. And instead of just compressing that detail and summing them up, we could print some other report, another report, a summary balance sheet, which will show less detail, be less overwhelming to somebody else. And really, in order to know which reports you need, you got to know who your audience is. And it's really important to know who your audience is, because sometimes some people want a lot of detail, sometimes they don't. If you're going to especially like some business owners or managers, and you want to just get the information to them and they want the bottom line, then we don't want a lot of subcategories. So we're just going to give a summary, but we'll have all the subcategories ready in another report, most likely, once they start asking questions about a particular line item. So we're going to go down here and go to reports in order to get a summary, and go to the company and financial, and then go to the balance sheet summary. And by contrast, if we look at this, change the date to 12/31/21, we see we have a lot less information here, meaning we just got the checking account, accounts receivable, and the other current assets. If we compare that, going back to the balance sheet, where we had the checking account in the checking account area, then the accounts receivable, then the other current assets broken out into these subcategories. And again, if we had more detailed and into more detailed accounts, this can go on for quite some time in terms of the detail. And if we go back to the summary, this is nice and neat and easy to see. It's almost too compressed. Now, if we give this to somebody, then that's often a good starting point, and it's often something that we can say, hey, here's this, and then be ready for them to ask any more information to follow up with the more detailed balance sheet so we can break down any information that is needed. I'm going to go up to the Customize Report up top and do some customization here. We're going to get into the habit of first going to the filters, then going to the header. I'm going to remove the date prepared, time prepared, report basis, and go back to the font. And we might want to get in the practice of putting a name down here if that's something that we want to just always get in the practice of. It might be something that we just want to have a footer all the time in some format. And then the fonts, I'll keep the fonts the same, and OK. Going to go ahead and export this to Excel. We already have an Excel file open, so we want to just put it to a new tab on that same Excel file by going to the Excel drop-down, create a new worksheet. It's going to go into an existing workbook, but we want a new worksheet, and we're going to say OK. And here is our create new worksheet. We want it in an existing workbook, however, so we'll select that item, then we'll browse. And we're going to look for that workbook. I'm going to select the drop down, Get Great Guitars, Section 2. And I'm just going to, we could click on it and open. I'm going to double click on it. And then we'll export it. And that should open a new Excel sheet, open a new tab, put this information, export this information to that new tab. Once it's done, we'll do our normal processing in that we're going to pull this tab over to the right-hand side so it's in order of when we generated these reports, just by clicking it and grabbing it and dragging it on over. Then I'm going to double-click on it to change the name, and I'm going to call it Summary Balance Sheet, something like that, and OK. And then I'm going to go to our normal items up here and go to the View tab up top. Windows, and unsplit the screen, and then just check out down here, go to the page layout view to see if it's going to print the way we would like it. And if we go there, we can see we do have the header here, and it's laid out, it fits all on one page. It looks nice. Of course it should, it's a summary, so we're okay there. So I'm going to go back to the normal, and there it is, and then let's save that and say OK. And close that, and there is the summary balance sheet.